Hi everybody, I thought I'd do a quick soundbite on the updates that have come through the government recently with regards to furlough, what you as employers need to be doing, and potentially after lockdown what you can be doing. We've been working in the employment field for a very long time, but this year, like many of you know, has been an extraordinary year with things changing on a daily basis. So obviously everything I'm about to talk to you is up to date as of today. Within the last 5 minutes things have changed and I'm going to try and cover them off, but this could be very different conversation again next week, so please do bear in mind that this is time sensitive. This talk's aimed predominantly at employers, so what's your responsibilities? So as many of you have probably heard now, the furlough has been extended. It was extended to December, now we're hearing it's going to be extended into March. Whether that's good or bad, only time will tell. It does mean, however, that you can continue to furlough staff at 80% up to the contribution of £2,500, which hopefully is good news for many of us. You do, however, need to remember that you'll need an updated furlough agreement. It's not enough to simply extend. You do need to produce that document and get it signed by both of you. You can also, since July, which is also going to continue, bring back your full-time staff on a part-time basis, paying only for the days and hours that they work, and the rest will be a government contribution. This again can help whether they're on 0 hours, whether they're on part-time, whether they're full-time. It can help engage your staff, keep them on the books, but obviously remove cash flow issues for yourself. Don't forget they can still take annual leave while they're on furlough, whether full furlough or part-time furlough, so make sure you do have that dialogue with them. And we are now awaiting an update. If you keep them on and do re-engage them in January next year, you can have £1,000 contribution back from the government towards retaining that staff member. I'm hoping that that's not going to go away, but with this extending into March, these figures, these dates may change. Do not forget that even those people on 0-hour contracts can be furloughed. We just need to be very careful how you manage that, what figures you use, but again, they can also be covered. What actually happens after lockdown, whether that's November, December, or worst case scenario into the new year? Well, what if your business can't continue? What's your responsibilities as an employer? So basically we all know that we've been put into tiers of various regions, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. That again is going to change due to the level of risk, weekly, monthly, quarterly. But under the scheme at the moment, if you do have to close, regardless of what's going on in the local restrictions, employees should be paid at least 60% to 67% of their wages, up to a maximum of £2,083.33. That means you don't have to find your final employee's salary wage pack. It should be contributed towards the government scheme. That gives you some comfort that regardless of what happens to you in your business, your employees will still walk away with up to 60-70% of their salary. However, if you're successful and you carry on, which we hope is very much the same for ourselves as well as many clients, you will reopen. You can still bring back full-time employees on a part-time basis and you will still be eligible for help. So it's not all doom and gloom that it's all or nothing. There are numerous schemes and they keep evolving, and hopefully that will continue even after lockdown. What if, unfortunately though, you do have to make staff redundant? You do need to follow a fair process. You need to select the pool of candidates from the right criteria, and you do need to make sure you go through that fairly. Ideally, you put them on furlough and make the decisions as you go, and if you need to re-employ people that previously you dismissed or made redundant because the furlough scheme was coming to an end, providing they were with you prior to September, you can bring them back and put them back on the furlough scheme. That's something that you would need to consider internally. A lot of discussions have taken place with redundancies. How you do the final calculations. Is it based on the furlough sum? Is it based on the original sum? Redundancy, as some of you may know, is based on the last 12 weeks salary before the redundancy package. Many of your staff could be on a reduced furlough scheme. So obviously, in our minds, that would be unfair to base statutory redundancy or even contractual redundancy based on that reduced sum. So recently, guidance has been very clear. You look at what their average salary was prior to being placed on furlough. That's the sum that you will use for calculating your statutory redundancy and will follow into your contractual redundancy pay. So be very careful and clear how you calculate those figures, and that will also come down to notice and other payment schemes. So please do make sure you follow the fair redundancy process, you follow your own procedures and policies, and you make sure you calculate it based on pre-furlough sums. A lot of you and your team are probably working from home at the moment. That's absolutely the guidance, and particularly in lockdown for non-key workers. But how do you as an employer protect yourself as well as protecting your employees, and what sort of things should you be considering? Well, updating your policies is key. They are your protection. You've thought about as much as possible, you've carried out a risk assessment, you've disseminated that to your team and your managers, and that hopefully not only guides everybody in what they should be doing, but is a level of protection going forward. So health and safety is two-way. Health and safety for your employees. So are they set up in their desks and in their positioning right? You touch in with them every day to make sure they're actually safe, they're secure, they're alive. It's very important to have that engagement anyway, and if you're working with staff, you want to have that engagement, but think of it from a health and safety perspective as well. Perhaps it's a risk assessment to be in the workplace, make sure it's updated, make sure it's key, as well as those for working at home. And also for an employer's point of view, you need to be very clear as to where your responsibilities start and end, what you should be doing, how far you should go, just to make sure you're constantly re-engaging in with the process. Now, what if you've got team members with their own devices? So they're using their own laptops or phones because they're at home. So you need to have very clear, stringent policies on whether their home insurance or your insurance covers it. GDPR, which we'll go into a bit more, but have you got proper firewalls and cyber security? What can they download and not download? Can they move it onto their personal emails? Have clear guidance on how they operate their own devices, and what happens if those own devices get a virus or don't work. What's the contingency plan? But likewise, what if they've got your equipment? Is it from their home insurance or are you covering it? Do your IT company deal with it, or do they need to deal with it themselves? Again, look at things like this. It may just seem like a practical thing to do, but actually if it's not on your checklist and it's missed, it could have drastic consequences. The other things is to consider is if they're in quarantine, if they travel and need to go into quarantine, are they complying with the government track and trace requirements? Are they quarantined where they say they're quarantined? How are you working that? So again, you want to make sure that you've got provisions, so they tell you where they do and don't travel to, what they're relying upon, what you're relying upon. Make sure you write that into a policy. GDPR, as I mentioned before, is a big thing, particularly if any of your staff are going to go and work overseas or potentially outside of the region. You need to make sure that if they're in their own device, that there's particular firewalls and cyber security and that data is protected. You need to make sure if they're transferring data, it's by your policy, by your processes, with clear guidance. What safeguards have you got for that data? You need to be very, very careful that that's considered, particularly if people are leaving Europe or in countries where there is no data protection synergy. Again, just make sure that you've spoken to the employee, that you go through it carefully with them and you update your policies. Can they work overseas at the moment? So if you're in a 4-week lockdown, can your staff go back and live with mum and dad during this period? Well, if you agree to that, they can do so providing they're following the government rules. The only considerations you need to have, and it's probably very unlikely that any of you will need this, but it's just an overview to be very careful. Make sure that it doesn't become a permanent establishment. So if you go to live in another country for the lockdown period, you mustn't be establishing almost like a branch office there, negotiating contracts there, operating as if you are in that country, because then you could come under scrutiny of the local rules, getting employment rights there. Potentially there's tax implications where you're attracting local tax rights. You'll then have to know what the local rules are, the local restrictions. So be clear, are they just there during the lockdown for a short-term period and they're working from home? Or is there any potential default of them becoming a business structure over there? Tax rules tend to give you some guidance. If it's over 183 days, that's when you should start to beginning to be concerned. Negotiating contracts and having an office there. Again, just look at the activities. They're the sort of things just to give yourself a conscious review. We are here always to assist you. So whether you're going to go through a redundancy process, update your furlough agreements, whether you want advice on whether people have put grievances in because you're not complying with the risk assessment, whether you need to update your policies, whether you've got GDPR concerns, it may seem like a lot to do and it's a minefield for many small employers, but you just take it step by step. A clear audit, a clear review, what's practical for you and how far do you need to go to protect yourself. We'll do all of that with you carefully. But if you have any questions, I've put my email on the slides. I'm very happy for you to drop me some questions for me to answer. We're also happy to have a free consultation just to see what you might need, give you a fixed fee for a piece of work, put you on a retainer so that you can give us a call, we can review all your documents, whatever works for you. I know as a business owner and an employer how much work's involved and how difficult it is keeping your business afloat, working remotely, managing your team whilst dealing with all this. But there are schemes out there to assist you. You just need to grab them, understand them and document it. And if I'm there, I can help. Thank you.